Darwin's theory, is it true or false? Darwin's theory propagates that we human beings came into existence through ape. And it is not God Almighty who created us. It is through the process of evolution humankind came into existence. Science and technology has increased, advanced, but it proves that Darwin's theory is just a theory, it is not a fact.
I welcome you all to have come here this evening. We have Dr. Shuaib Said. He is a doctor qualified in Unani. He has lectured in many topics in different parts of the country on comparative religious studies. And also he is a very knowledgeable person on the involved in research work in IRF on comparative religious studies, dialogues with non-Muslims. We are very fortunate to have him here to give his lecture today. Inshallah, he will be speaking today on the refutation of Darwin's theory. Now I request Dr. Shuaib Said to deliver his speech, please.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Nahmaduhu nusalli ala rasulihil kareem. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Qala rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri. Wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً قَالُوا أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ قَالَ إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ صدق الله مولانا العظيم. Mr. Chairman and dear brothers and sisters, may I greet you all with the Islamic greeting. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. As the subject announced, refutation of Darwin's theory, or Darwin's theory, is it true or false? As most of you must be knowing, what is Darwin's theory in general? Darwin, his theory propagates or tries to make us understand that we human beings, we came into existence through an ape. Our ancestors were the ape, and it is not God Almighty who created us. It is through the process of evolution humankind came into existence. Basically, by this theory, what they want to propagate or present to the world, that God does not exist. God is not the creator of the world. It is through natural evolution that living creatures came into existence, and gradually that particular stage came into existence where human being came into being. Darwin, his full name was Charles Robert Darwin. Charles Darwin, most of us will know or will understand that he was a qualified person, that he must have been graduated in biology or in his science. But the fact is that he was not graduated in his field. He was just a student or amateur in natural studies. He was very much interested in nature. And because of his interest, because of this interest, he happened to be in a ship by the name of HMS Beagle. He took permission from his father so that he could take this travel in this ship, HMS Beagle, which was supposed to take a round throughout the world for 5 years in 1832. And in this ship, when he went traveling in 1832, this ship reached a particular place by the name of Galapagos, an island, and there Darwin noticed finches, a particular type of birds, having different shapes of beaks. At this particular observation, Darwin thought, that how is it possible that this species, the finches, they are having different sizes of beaks. So one idea clicked in his mind. He thought for a moment and he said to himself that it is because of natural selection from one generation to the another generation, these sizes of the beak from small beak to the larger beak came into existence. So this is how, for the first time, the idea of natural selection came into his mind, and he made a study over it or pondering over it, and he came to the conclusion that it is because of the natural selection of the qualities in particular species gets transferred to the next generation, and then to the next generation, and then to the next generation, and in a period of time, these accumulation of these qualities reach to such an extent that one species converts into another species. One animal converts into another animal. And in this process, the final stage is that man comes into existence. So it is through one species to another species, from one species converting to another species, this process continues on, and then the final stage reaches and man comes into existence. Please note, he did not do any experiment. He did not go through university. He did not come out with a scientific evidence as such that one species converts into another species. It was his own thinking, his own idea of the finches, which was of different size. But with this particular theory and idea, he wrote a book, Origin of Species, in 1859. In 1859, he wrote a book, Origin of Species, giving an idea that it is through the natural selection of the advantageous qualities in one species that converts into another species, another generation, that is responsible for the conversion of one animal, one species into another animal. So he presented this theory of origin of species by the process of natural selection. But please note, when he wrote this book, Origin of Species, he had one particular chapter by the name of Difficulties of My Theory. And in these difficulties of my theory, he himself mentions that my theory has problems to be accepted. Number one, the fossils of the living creatures that are available is not an enough proof to give an evidence that one species converted into another species. So this is the problem. But he hoped that with the advancement of the science, in future, there will be more excavations, more fossils will be available, and then my theory would be hopefully be proved by finding the intermediary fossils which will be linking one species to another species. So he hoped that in future advancement of the science, his theory will be proved. This was one difficulty. That certain body parts, certain body organs are so complex that to imagine that it must have come through process of evolution, that is impossible. For example, eye organ or eyesight. This eye has several parts in it: retina, lenses, nerve cells. The whole eye parts, little bit of it, all are responsible for the functioning of the eye. If one part of the eye is not developed, the functioning of the eye will not come into existence. So he said that how is it possible that if eye as an organ, if it is evolving gradually and gradually, it must not have come into existence all at once in the perfect state. So if it comes gradually and gradually, it is impossible, because just one part of the eye, if it is not developed, it will not function. So to imagine eye can come into existence through the process of evolution is impossible. This is the difficulty of my theory. But again, he said, with the advancement of science and technology, this difficulty will be proved. This was the second difficulty. and he had the problem of natural instincts. And he could not explain how could it possible that natural instincts could be evolved from one species to another species. For example, is not taught how to suck the mother's milk. This is through the instinct created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The child knows that after he's delivered or it is delivered, he knows how to suck the milk. This is instinct. So Darwin, he thought about the instincts that are available in living creatures. He could not explain how these instincts, natural instincts, could be evolved by the process of natural selection. But all these difficulties that he mentioned in his book, Origin of Species, he was very much hopeful that with the advancement of science and technology in future, because science and technology was not advanced in his time, in future, my theory will be accepted as fact. But science has advanced, but it falsifies his theory. It proves that Darwin's theory is just a theory, it is not a fact. Because in his time, science not advanced, it was not well established. At his time, the microscope could examine just to a greater level of a cock. The cell, which is today explored and examined in the microscope, powerful microscope, at that time he could not. In his age, the cell could not be examined. But just within 50 years' time, Gregory Mendel, he discovered the cell structure of a human body. And he discovered later, and the genes, and the nucleus, and the complex structure of the cell came into existence. With the understanding of the nucleus and the DNA molecules and the genes, that these are the responsible parts which has the master coding of everything of a human being or living creature, it was a big blow to Darwin's theory. Just within 50 years' time, Gregory Mendel, he discovered the cell structure of a human body. And he discovered later on the discovery of inheritance and the DNA and the genes and the nucleus and the complex structure of the cell came into existence. With the understanding of the nucleus and the DNA molecules and the genes, that these are the responsible parts which has the master coding of everything of a human being or living creature, it was a big blow to Darwin's theory. So with this advancement, Darwin's theory crumbled like anything. But still, people who believed Darwin's theory wanted to remain intact and wanted to support this theory. They came that coding of the everything is there in the nucleus, and because of the change in the nucleus, then only there can be change in the species, in the animal, because if the nucleus, the genes, the DNA, these things have the coding, and if there is a change in this coding, then only there can be change in the human structure, in the human body. They thought and they came up with an idea that it is because of gross mutations, gross changes in the nucleus that are responsible for changing from one species to another species. It is just amazing. This is again their thinking, their understanding that changes in the nucleus is responsible for the change of one species to another species. But scientifically today we know that changing in the nucleus will not create a better. If you have a complicated watch, in this watch, if you make a random change, it will not improve the watch, it will harm the watch. So random mutation cannot be taken as a criteria for having an advantageous change from one lower species to another species. So again, this theory of random mutation was proved to be false. The fact is that even evolutionists who believe in this theory of natural selection and that one species converts into another species, they go against their own theory. Like Colin Peterson, one evolutionist, he says that till now, not a single species has changed from one species to another species by way of natural selection. So if they themselves admit, how can you say that one species converts into another species? They're also trying to present it, the theory of industrial melanism. What is industrial melanism? In England, when there was industrial revolution, before the industrial revolution, the barks, the trees, if they had light-colored moths and the dark-colored moths, the dark-colored moths, the insects, could be easily as a prey and been eaten by a bigger animal. So in the not come into existence, when it did not darken the tree barks, the dark-colored moths was eaten up. So this is how the dark-colored moths was scanty and in minimum quantity. But with the industrial revolution, the color of the barks, the color of the tree was darkened. And because the color of the tree was darkened, the dark moths, dark-colored moths, could be camouflaged and they could not be noticed by the bigger insects, and they could be remain there. And in the process of time, the light-colored moths were eaten up. So this is how this natural thing that took place, people who believe in Darwin's theory, they took an evidence and said, see how the light-colored moth converted into dark-colored moth. How one colored moth converts into another color. This is how they prove that Darwin's theory is true. If Darwin's theory was true, biggest fact is that if they claim that one species converts into another species, then definitely they should have intermediary fossils. You do know what is fossils? The remains of the living creatures that are embedded in the earth. If those fossils are excavated, if they claim that one species converts into another species, they should have enough evidence of those fossil record which is in between one animal and the another animal. But the fact is that they do not find the intermediary fossils record. Suppose if they say that the reptiles converted into birds, they must have intermediary animals, the fossil record, which should have half reptile and half bird, at least half reptile and half bird. But they do not find any single species which is in between having half reptile and half bird. So the fossils records today that is excavated, they prove geological evidences that today they have come up. They could dig up to a level of Cambrian strata. They dig up the earth geologically to the level of Cambrian strata, which can be dated from 500 to 550 million years. In this particular strata of the earth, they could find innumerable complex living creatures fossils, the remains of the living creatures. And they could find the fossil record of shark, which could be dated 400 million years back, the fossil record of cockroach, which could be dated 320 million years back. They could see the fossil record of ants, which could be dated 100 million years back. They could find the fossil record of grasshopper, which could be dated 40 million years back. So Richard Dawson, again an evolutionist, he says, how is it possible that all the complex living creatures, as if they are planted at one time, and it shows no evidence that one species converts into another species? In one particular age, if you have all different complex, small and big creatures, fossils, that one species did not convert into another species. They were all at one time. If they were all at one time, the theory of evolution is proved false. So fossils record proves that Darwin's theory is not true. But yet, though they could not substantiate that Darwin's theory could be proved through fossils record, they manufacture fossils record. And for example, how do they do that? In the magazines, in the television channels and different channels, Discovery channels and different video programs, we see the construction of the ape man, as if we are given to understand that these were the creatures which existed. But what is the fact? These creatures did not exist. It is reconstruction of these creatures, ape man. It is reconstruction. What is reconstruction? That if they find one piece of bone, for example, if they find one arm bone in the fossil, based on one arm bone, one hand, they construct the whole human being, the whole ape man. This is construction. If they find one skull, based on one skull, they make the whole body of ape man, signifying that this is the ape man, which is the intermediary between the ape and human being. So they fabricate drawings and construction by just picking up one piece or two pieces of skeleton and make the wife and children and the whole family, signifying that these are the ape man, half ape and half man. This is forgery. An example of such forgery is that one such thing took place in Piltdown, a certain place known as Piltdown. In 1912, Dr. Charles Dawson, he presented a skull with a jawbone and the skull. And he said, this is the ape man, half ape and half man. And he tried to prove that this will prove Darwin's theory. Later on, Kenneth Oakley in 1949, he made a fluorine testing on this skull bone. With this fluorine testing, he came to know that the jawbone had few or very little or negligible fluorine content. The skull had little more fluorine content. Doing the fluorine testing of the jawbone and the skull separately, it was proved that it did not belong to the same species. But again, Wiener in 1953, through again a further study, proved to the world that the jawbone actually belonged to an ape which has died recently, just few years back, and the skull belonged to a 500 years back a man. So it was the half skull taken, joined together and manipulated and trying to prove that this is an ape man. And they had stained it with potassium dichromate to give an understanding that it is backdated of long years back. But once they put in acid, the potassium dichromate finished off. This is one example of Piltdown forgery.